Welcome to Community Chats, bringing you stories and insights from the heart of Community Living Toronto, a nonprofit organization that proudly supports people with intellectual disabilities and their families. We will focus on stories of belonging and inclusion and topics of interest from communities across Ontario and the world. From uplifting moments to breaking barriers, from innovative policies to ideas from leading thinkers, we continue to advocate for inclusive communities and support the rights and choices of people with an intellectual disability.
Community Chats are Community Living Toronto's way of sharing our stories, inspiring each other, and learning about what is happening in our community across Canada and around the world. Today I interviewed Jan Stewart, who's an accomplished Bay Street professional, partner to her husband David, a mother, and now an author. Jan has written a wonderful, engaging story that tells the story of her life, from early romance with her husband to heartbreaking adversity, and how to move past being frightened and frozen to becoming a parent who's thriving and now giving back to others from the experiences that she's had. In her book, Hold On Tight, A Parent's Journey to Raising Children with Mental Illness, Jan talks openly about how to listen to your child, how to deal with OCD and autism, strategies for getting through difficult times, the importance of friendships and self-care, both the basics and the more advanced stuff around how you take care of yourself, the importance of humor, carving out part of your life as your own, how to refuel and regain your identity, and importantly, how to forgive yourself. I enjoyed this conversation. Jan's a fascinating person. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So I want to start off with a little bit of a question that's different from the content of the book, but you've had a career in business and as a senior person in a large organization, and then you pivot to doing writing a book, which is quite an undertaking. How did you make that switch? And I'd love to hear a little bit about your process for how you wrote and how you found it.
It's an excellent question, Brad. Thanks. I had such a high pressure career on Bay Street, and I traveled internationally a lot. I couldn't have done it without David as my true partner. And part of the reason I thrived on the job was because it gave me respite from home, believe it or not, and separated me from the challenges. But my firm, Aegon Zender, which is a fantastic global executive search firm, has a partnership retirement age at 62. And when I reached that retirement age, I could have stayed on with the firm, but I said, no, it's time to do something else. I had been thinking for quite a while, with all the various parents, educators, and employers reaching out, but particularly parents, for help, to say, it'd be great to do something to give back and pay it forward. And so originally, while I was still employed, I wrote a 10, 15 page, call it an article, really as a catharsis for myself. But it formed the birth, shall we say, of the book. And once I retired, I said, now I have the time, even though I was still very busy with my governance and advocacy activities. But I had the time, and I said, I really want to pay it forward. So I wrote the first draft, but I was concerned about the family. And I said, I certainly will never publish this book unless they support it. So after I finished the first draft, I approached them all. And Andrew, I read it too, and Ainsley and David read it themselves. They each had different reactions, which is probably not surprising. And David, as you know, Brad, from the Lights Board, is much more private than I am. And I think he had some concern that the children might be stigmatized. Andrew just thought he was going to be famous, but had some concern that some of the things that his impulsivity have driven him to do would make people think less of him. And Ainsley, who is not disclosed to her employer, knew there was a great risk that they would find out, and has accepted that and actually embraced it. All three of them said to me, you must go forward with this book. I made numerous changes, additions, deletions, edits based on what they wanted. I promised them from the beginning I wouldn't publish one word that they didn't want me to. and I always keep my promises.
Excellent. I was going to ask you a little bit more about the being vulnerable side of things. So your book, I won't give it away, but your book starts off with a very personal story that was quite traumatic, I would expect. And throughout the book, you talk about your and David's romance and living in New York, and you really open yourselves up. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like your family was very supportive of sharing that. Were there steps to get you there, or conversations that brought you to being comfortable with it, or what was that like, becoming so open and honest with this book to so many people that you don't know you?
Well, I have to say, to start with, I'm from New York City, so I'm a pretty open book. I know that's a bit of a stereotype, but for me, I think I'm wired that way largely. But I can tell you that when you're in crisis with your children, or in fact, in any crisis, but with my kids, there were so many moments of heartbreaking adversity. And it became so obvious that in those moments, I was so frightened and frozen. And then when others start reaching out, you've got to help. And it became very clear to me. There have been so many doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, professionals that have written about neurodiversity and mental health. But I was surprised when I was doing the research for the book that relatively little has been written from a parental perspective about raising kids like mine. And so I'm proud to fill that void. But I have no problem giving away the beginning of the book. I'm hoping it'll entice those of you who haven't read it. And so let me share that. Would that be okay, Brad?
Absolutely, please.
I open saying that I never thought that I would live with fear in my own house. That David and I came home from work one day. The kids were in grade school. They had both had really good days. And we thought we'd be safe going 2 houses down to meet a neighbor's new baby. And we literally left for 10 minutes. And as we rounded the corner, just those 10 minutes later on our return, it was a cold February evening. I was shocked to find Ainsley, who was 7 at the time, hysterical, shivering, frightened, in the snow barefoot in just her nightgown. She was terrified of Andrew's rage. He had started one of those 2-hour screaming fits, punching holes in walls, swearing, lashing out in anything and everything. And I said to myself, first, I should have protected her better. But secondly, as heartbreaking as that evening was, what's remained in my mind all these years is that as frightening as that evening was, Andrew was not the problem, not the issue. It was his disorders. They were the abuser.
That's a great way, and you talk about this in the book around how you frame pieces in that the abuser was not my son, but his disorders. Can you talk about how that that framing and in a lot of times when in our work or when you're raising kids, people are behaving bad, you can sort of personalize that and say you are behaving bad, or and flipping that into I like you, it's the behaviors that you're exhibiting that I don't like. How did that's a great insight for people to take away. Can you talk about more how you came to that and how that worked for you throughout?
Absolutely, Brad. And this has to be, sure, absolutely. This has to do with one of the key insights in the book, which is talk openly with your child. You know, children with these disorders are naturally frightened. They don't know why they're causing such pain and havoc and wrecking terror at home and at school. And even if they don't ask it, even as teenagers, they want help. So it's important to sit down with them, let them know they're understood, try to listen without criticism or judgment, which is not my strength, and let them know they're valued. You can understand how shocked I was when Ainsley wrote me that note saying she was a bad child because of her out of control behavior, or when Andrew was going through those frightening rages and rituals, he told me he felt he was going crazy and wanted to die. But David and I knew we had to sit down with them, let them know they weren't bad children, that what was happening wasn't their fault. And here's the point. We separated them from their disorders so that their identities were not 100% tied to their issues. And that was really important. By the way, we also didn't hide or avoid information, including discussing medications. Even on the professional healthcare side, it's very common in, for example, obsessive compulsive disorder, that the psychiatrist, Andrew's psychiatrist at SickKids, certainly asked him to name his OCD. And he named it Howie. So again, he wasn't the child that was having these terrible compulsive rituals and doing these bizarre actions that he knew made no sense. It was Howie. Now, it's still important that they understand these issues are part of who they are so that they can work on them through therapy. But Andrew always says, I am Andrew. I am not defined by my autism. And that pretty much sums it up.
Fantastic. You talk about some of the difficulty and the struggle you had around finding, keeping, and maintaining friendships.
Yeah.
And I think that also touches on the importance of self-care. And you did find a strong social group, and you talk in the book about spending time with families and other friends that were going through similar pieces. I'd also, and you talk about getting away to, especially David, getting away to family cottage in the Laurentians. The importance of self-care. Can you speak to that? I'm always struck. One of the programs that many funding people receive is passport money, and it's often underutilized in the area of parental breaks. Yeah. So parents not taking time to take care of themselves. What was your experience or suggestions would you have for others around the importance of self-care?
This is something I frankly learned the hard way. It didn't come naturally. I was a workaholic. As you can tell, probably I'm triple type A, but I learned the hard way, probably through some health issues that came, including cancer, kidney operations, a whole bunch of other things. And I woke up finally. So self-care goes way beyond the all-important, and they're still all-important, exercising, eating healthfully, and sleeping. Just even a few years ago, I switched to a healthy Mediterranean diet. I remember just scooping in tubs of ice cream during Andrew's rituals and rages, and that wasn't very good. Exercise, very important, and we all try to sleep as well we can. But reaching out for the support you need is so important. So whether it's to professionals or, for me, other parents in those support groups have, as I said, strengthened my fortitude and really formed that community. We even joke about situations that other families wouldn't understand and find funny, whether Ainsley's rude swearing at her teachers that she didn't feel supported her, or Andrew, after a teacher told him a school rule was set in stone, he asked where the stone was. So you've got to have humor as well. That's an important part of your coping toolkit.
Yeah.
But you've got to carve out part of your life as your own, away from your partner and away from your children. You can too easily get sucked in and burned out and lost in the morass of your children's struggles. And David and I think, have thrived partly because we give each other the benefit of the doubt and trust one another. But frankly, we lead parallel lives. As you mentioned, he'll go to the Laurentians with our daughter, but Andrew needs oversight. So I'll stay quite happily, by the way, here. And oftentimes throughout my business career, we had wonderful international conferences and a lot of spouses and partners would come, and David couldn't. That was our reality. But carving out part of your life as your own, whether it's your career or your hobbies. So for me, I go on the treadmill 5 times a week at the gym, and that really helps me think through my issues and regain perspective. I'm a highly competitive duplicate bridge player, as you mentioned, and you've got to focus 200% on bridge. You must take breaks. So sometimes when you're in crisis, it's a 10, 15-minute walk by yourself, or I love a warm, soothing bubble bath. All these activities help you refuel and regain your identity and rebuild. And most importantly, perhaps, and again, very difficult for me, forgive yourself for your mistakes and be kind to yourself. Finding Ainsley shivering, frightened in the snow during Andrew's rage, as I said, I should have protected her better, and it took me months to forgive myself. And David and I were textbook parents. We told both kids, you will not be limited by your issues and challenges. You can do and be anything you want. And we believe it, and fortunately they do too. But when it came time for Andrew to graduate from high school, he decided he wanted to attend MIT. Got in his head, and he certainly isn't a candidate for any university, much less college. And he was rightfully resentful of me for months. And I had a long time forgiving myself for having given him such unrealistic dreams. So self-care really is critical, and I embrace it now wholeheartedly.
That's great. Good advice to everyone. I also found it fascinating in terms of Andrew's own self-care, big baseball fan, and him talking about going to baseball games, and it's just a reprieve from the world for 3 hours to just be engrossed in that. I thought that was great. My son and I also often do that, so I really related to that piece. We've got a few minutes left, and I just wanted to finish off with a question around advocacy and your role as a parent and advocate. You talked about the importance of being assertive and tenacious, but not aggressive. How did you find that balance, especially between those three ideas?
I think what you're really asking is, how did you find it being from New York? So, I think I learned early on in my career. Business was a great grounding before I even had children, to learn how to partner with clients, with candidates, with customers, whoever, but to get what you want and to move the agenda forward by being assertive, not aggressive. You want to, as a parent, we all want to be squeaky wheels, and it's important not to give up, but to watch how you're doing it, and that you're putting yourself on the same side, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. If a parent was approaching you as a deputy minister, how would you respond? And I think that's very helpful to this day. I go through that internal exercise before I meet with someone.
Great. If you'd like to buy a copy, it is available, as Jan said, widely. I actually ordered an advance copy on Amazon. And on the day of release, I got an email from Amazon saying they were so overwhelmed with orders that my order would be delayed. So I gather things are going well. But again, if you're an in-person bookstore shopper and buyer, you mentioned it's available at Indigo.
Yeah, well, it's not available in person at Indigo, unfortunately, with their cyber attack.
Okay.
They're still storing. But Caversham Booksellers, which some of you may know, is the largest bookstore in North America in terms of psychology, mental health, that kind. They have copies downtown.
Okay, and Barnes and Noble for anybody that's in the States over the next little bit,
Yep.
and then again easily through Amazon.
Yes.
Great book. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes this morning sharing your story and journey. Great inspirational story that really fills a much needed area of this. What are the experience of parents and caregivers as they go through the experience of raising kids with different abilities. So thank you, Jan, for your efforts and for spending time this morning.
Delighted to be here, Brad. Thank you.
Jan's mantra has been to help. And hold on tight, a parent's journey to raising children with mental illness really accomplishes that. A catharsis for herself that we all now benefit from. Jan's book, which I've read, I can highly recommend, is a really engaging, personal, insightful read. It's available on Amazon and at bookstores across the city. Make sure you get yourself a copy. We will be sharing more of these conversations, and we love your feedback. So please leave us a comment, rate us where you get your podcasts, or on our YouTube channel. And of course, subscribe so you can hear the next one. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Don't forget to join us next time as we unpack the power of community through collaborative initiatives and shared experiences. Available on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and YouTube. Follow us on social media @CL Toronto. Let's chat, share, and spread those good vibes together. We hope these discussions will inspire you and give new ideas to add your voice to our mission of making our communities and neighborhoods inclusive and welcoming.